There we go. So the way I'm going to run it basically is do a quick introduction. I'll do a little bit of trivia. Tilly, this is your choice. I'm going to put the prologue on the screen if you would not mind reading that. And
Sure.
then after that, we just let it go where it goes, and I cap things off with three questions at the end. So,
Okay, sounds good.
let's do it then. Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we look at episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here. I have two guests today. They are a writing team. Their website is Bird Guest. Hello, Susan and Tilly Bridges.
Hello.
Hello, nice to be here.
Thanks for coming. I did actually read Kill Switch on the Train yesterday, so I had a good time with that one. So definitely cool. Now, I don't, you can call this a compliment because that means I was thinking about it more, but I found myself every 2 pages being like, I need to go back and reread those 2 pages. So I was like kind of like reading it like in a little bit of a time loop. So
Sure, we like to get you thinking.
Yeah. I'd be like, wait a minute, I just missed like 3 things, and in the writing and in the art as well. So I definitely, and I was looking at the Kindle version where it had all the behind the scenes stuff in between the issues. So that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, Walter Giovanni did a wonderful job on the art. So yeah,
yes, he's tremendous.
It's nice to be able to linger over his fantastic work.
Yeah, it's been my comic reading is usually like every once in a while I'll want to get a book and it's like do Kindle Unlimited, it's like $1 more, and then I'll just like binge on whatever comics they have for a month. But yours is not on Unlimited, so I just got it straight up, but I was worth it. So
well, thank you, we appreciate it.
We do.
Today's episode is Nervous Man in a $4 Room. I guess since it's your first time, and let's talk a little bit about how the Twilight Zone sort of entered your life. I had this weird thing I've said before where I grew up like knowing the 80s one very well because I was always on TV, and didn't really get into the originals until about around the year 2000. And recently I'm doing the podcast, so now I'm just like laser focusing on each and every episode. Where did you folks get started on the zone?
I used to stay up late at night when I was a kid watching the originals very late, and they would mess me up because they're kind of intense if you're a kid. But I loved them ever since then. And then we would catch the reruns or the marathons that they would do like on New Year's Eve. We would always watch those.
Yeah.
And now we're doing.
I don't even know how long they've been doing that, but a really long
time. And now we've started. We realized that there was a bunch that we've still never seen, so we've been working through them in order.
Yes.
With our kid watching them all. So we're in the middle of season 3 now, and there's there's so many I hadn't seen before. I was really excited.
Yeah, we realized like for those New Year's marathons, they just kind of play the same ones.
Yeah, the same ones get a lot of airplay.
It's not all of them.
Right.
So we're like, oh yeah, we've seen this one 14 times and this one never. So it's been really kind of fun to go through them. And I make little posts on Twitter about each episode.
How did you first get into Twilight Zone?
Me?
Yeah. Did you watch it as a kid like me, up late, getting the crap scared out of you?
I don't remember staying up late to watch it. I remember staying up late to watch Quantum Leap reruns.
Well, sure.
But like, it was just kind of one of those shows that was kind of always on at some point, like in the background. Like my household was very TV focused because I had no supervision. And so with like, me and my brother and my sister watched a whole bunch of stuff we probably shouldn't have been watching, but this was one of those things that was just kind of in the mix, let's say. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I am. There's so many of these I had not seen before. I'd seen some of these growing up, but my formative moment for this podcast, it's been a while since I brought it up on the show, was last summer. I live in Japan, and I was just hanging out at the family house in the mountains by myself. And the floor had been replaced. I'm in the living room of this tatami floor, and like the floor has been ripped out. There's this giant dirt pit. So I'm sitting by the dirt pit inside eating dinner and watching the Twilight Zone. There's like a shovel sticking out of the hole in the floor. And I was like, this is a way to watch the Twilight Zone, isn't it?
It's a very Twilight Zone setup.
It is, really.
Yeah, really.
Inspirational.
But from that point, then I was like, I got to get the Blu-rays. I have to watch all of these and talk about them. So, that's what I'm doing. I want to read just a little bit of trivia on this episode before we really get rolling. The air date for this one was October 14th, 1960. Rod Serling wrote the script in response to a network order. They wanted a few cheap episodes featuring minimal actors. This one definitely has minimal actors on screen and came in at $5,000 under budget. So
nice.
Job done. We've mentioned the director Douglas Hayes before, and he's here right in the middle of directing 9 Twilight Zone episodes in total, and that's pretty much his bread and butter in his professional career, it seems. But hey, 9 Twilight Zone episodes, that's something to brag about. Joe Mantell played one Mr. Jackie Rhodes. While his resume is not prolific, he was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his part in 1965's Marty, which did win Best Picture itself. He also appeared in Chinatown, delivering the titular line as well as its sequel, The Two Jakes. He'll return to the Twilight Zone in the episode Steel alongside Lee Marvin. George is played by Richard D. Morgan. He got his start writing for radio, and in 1958 began showing up on the TV screen in shows like Maverick, Peter Gunn, and Rawhide. After all that, he shifted to producing, pushing through dozens of episodes of 12 O'Clock High, the TV show, and The Fugitive. And we don't get stock music this week, because sometimes we do. This week we get a Jerry Goldsmith score, and that always just, presses my Planet of the Apes and Star Trek The Motion Picture buttons, because I love those soundtracks. Dilly, to get us into things, I am going to flash the prologue on the screen, and if you would not mind giving it a read. And you can do that how... Oh,
yep.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm just going to dive in. This is Mr. Jackie Rhodes, age 34, and where some men leave a mark of their lives as a record of their fragmentary existence on Earth, this man leaves a blot, a dirty, discolored blemish to document a cheap and undistinguished sojourn amongst his betters. What you're about to watch in this room is a strange mortal combat between a man and himself. For in just a moment, Mr. Jackie Rhodes, whose life has been given over to fighting adversaries, will find his most formidable opponent in a cheap hotel room that is in reality the outskirts of the Twilight Zone.
Got to put the pause in, that's right.
That's right.
You got to do it Rod style. That's the only way.
Now that we're at season 2, I have some people occasionally like humming the music as well, because it's hard to do that without the music kicking in. This actually was one of my watching it by a Dirt Pit episodes last summer. So this is one I've seen several times. I had it on those old school DVDs that have the worst menus ever. But yeah, this one it's attractive and repulsive when I'm looking at it on a DVD and I'm just choosing an episode, because it's so small scale, but it is really well done. Like almost a one person play, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that it was written with those constraints you mentioned, but as a writer, I kind of like getting those weird problems where you have to come up with something that fits within these odd constraints. And
yeah, Twilight Zone did that a lot.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
And I don't know. I really love the episode. I love any kind of episode that explores identity and why we are who we are. And that's the kind of stories we write. And so this thing was right up my alley. I had never seen it before. We just watched it for the first time a few weeks ago as part of our rewatch, and I instantly fell in love with it.
Oh yeah, then I sent my request at just the right time. Something will serendipity.
You really did.
Right? These things sometimes work out quite well. But yeah, what was your initial take? Because like for me, it was kind of like one act play, and you just watch a mirror image too. I feel like in a way, this is what happens when the doppelganger sort of catches up with you.
Yeah, I think part of the reason it resonated so much with me is because it has really, really strong trans feelings in it to me. I'm not saying that Rod Serling was trans or that he wrote it with that intent, but the whole trying to find your real self and not liking the person you've been and trying to figure out how to get to be who you are is a very intrinsically trans thing. And there are so many moments, so many lines of dialogue all the way through that hit exactly home, that make it work so well. It's kind of hard to believe.
Like the whole internal struggle.
Yeah, but it's even more than that. I mean, it's like on the one hand, I've never read anything that says, that Rod might have thought he was trans, so I don't think that's the case, but he may have known somebody who was like this. And in the 60s, that wasn't a thing you could really be very open about. Even now it's hard, right? So there's always the chance that, in talking with somebody, because Rod was a very social justice guy, very socially forward. And I feel like it's not out of the realm of possibility that he might have been familiar with the struggles of people, of trans people. So there's always a chance that it could have been intentional. Some of it is really specific, so it's hard to believe it was accidental, but coincidences do happen. So who knows?
Yeah, one thing, I do find with the Twilight Zone, for a lot of these ideas, this is, the first time someone bothered to put it on the television.
Sure.
I sound a little bit like a broken record, but on the Blu-rays, they have the bumpers for other shows at the end, and it's usually there's so much dissonance. Was it this one or the thing about machines? It's basically telling you to go like contribute to the party of your choice after. I'm like, wow, that message doesn't fit with the Twilight Zone at all. Because when I sent you an email, the one that, and I intentionally was like choose some episodes. I guess the one that people are like all over, that's last season. Oh, Eye of the Beholder. That's the one where I was almost like wondering, is this like sort of a like nascent kind of idea, trans sort of idea in that one. But it shows up in like multiple episodes. And one of the reasons I really try and bring in a lot of different people on the show is there's so many angles on these shows. I can't just be like, I did want to start by just, I'll just do it me and my friends. I'll call it my friends. It'll be an easy podcast to do. It is an easy podcast to do, but I quickly got to the point where, wow, I need to bring in like a wide variety of voices to like talk about this properly.
Sure.
What are a few of the quotes that I was just looking through my notes to see if I had put any specific quotes, but which ones really struck a chord with you?
Oh, well, okay. I took notes because I knew I'd forget them. Okay. So the first one that popped out was when his reflection said to Jackie, that you always look like somebody's squeezing you through a door, right? Because he's always upset. He's always feeling oppressed. He's feeling pressure from society. And then he asked him where does he sleep at night? Hide in a locked closet. And that's pretty literal in terms of, trans people who couldn't be out, which kind of blew my mind. And even later,
I wonder where the whole LGBT in the closet thing.
Yeah, I don't know the genesis of that, but
I never thought of that.
Also, one of the times when he's shouting at his reflection, saying, no, you're wrong. I can do this. I can be the quote unquote man society wants me to be. And the first place he runs is to the closet. So it's
it's like literal.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's a moment where Jackie says to his reflection, I wish I could trade you and use another model. That's when he was talking to his actual reflection, the poor excuse of a man that he was trying to be, which has very big trans feels to it. There's the whole section where they're discussing a woman from his past that he lost, right? Janie Reardon, that you never got to tell her that how much you needed her, how much you loved her, and he got locked away and he couldn't do that. And then his reflection says, you wouldn't want somebody who's sweet and pretty, who would love you, be kind and gentle with you, which is, how you would treat yourself when you actually like who you are as a human. And if you note, Janie Reardon has the exact same initials as Jackie Rhodes. And I feel like that would be a really big coincidence.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. And at the end, where he gets his confidence and he becomes his true self, and he calls to check out of this room that he's been trapped in, that's been oppressing him, he tells them to call him Jack. He changes his name was it Jack? No, it's John. Okay, John.
Well, they're the same.
Well, but no, they're not, because John is only one vowel tweak away from Jane.
Oh, I see.
So he gets the trans name change, and
that is very interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's so much there. It's just, I don't know. It's there's a lot. There's a whole lot of coincidences, and I didn't write down every line, but their whole back and forth is, what it's like when you're first figuring out that you're trans and you don't want to be, because what is that going to mean for your life? And what is it going to mean for the way society is going to treat you? And I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. but you're so unhappy with who you've been, trapped in the, you know, the wrong body presentation. And so I don't know, I just identified with it on so many levels, and it's so specific in so many of those little ways that it I don't know, it seems like maybe Rod knew somebody and was like, I could put that into a story. That's a good internal conflict, you know, that people go through.
Yeah, I'm thinking like the $4 hotel room, and a little bit it's if you've ever been to Disney World, they used to have like Cranium Command, or hell, they got Inside Out, the movie, right, where it's what the whole movie's taking place in someone's head, and this kind of I think that's where the small scale of this really does it some justice, because it almost is like you're just watching some guy's inner thoughts. And that kind of brings me up. I'm curious where you put George in the picture, or you know, the gangster that's
yes, okay,
so
so
murder.
George, I interpret sort of as a stand-in for society, and the crimes, the gangs that they're involved in, is sort of the way society in this short has interpreted being a man. Okay, George even tells him, he gives him the gun and says, it's time for you to be a man. And how's he going to be a man? Is by doing violence and killing somebody else who won't conform to what they want. Right. And so the whole thing is Jackie, he's trying to be tough. He's trying to say, I can be that guy, but he can't, because he's not that guy and he doesn't want to be that guy. So you get that moment later where Jackie's arguing with his reflection, and he says, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And then the phone immediately rings, and it's George calling to see if he carried out the hit, and he instantly is subdued. And he's like, I will be told what to do, because this is George, and this is what he expects of me, to be part of society as a man. So you get to see how and you know, he's under the threat of violence, which George tells him if he doesn't carry this out, he's gonna, you know, experience violence. He might be killed. If you're not going to be the person society wants you to be, you're going to suffer for it. So there's that moment, you know, that great moment where the real him has finally come out, and he stands up to George, and he defends himself, and he kicks George out. He shows him the door, he gives him the gun back, but he disarms it. He takes away their ability to harm him because he doesn't care what they think anymore. So yeah, it I don't know, it all fits together so well. It blows my mind.
Yeah, for sure. Because I'm sitting here thinking, you know, like there were things in America, like, you know, we talk about like toxic masculinity, and especially in the States, it's like, you know, you need to go out and be ready to punch someone in the face, pound a few beers, and that sort of thing. And that, I'm wondering if that's where I ended up in like Japan, you know? I like keeping to my own bubble, keeping my opinions mostly to myself, you know? And
even back, it was definitely, you know, toxic masculinity is a thing that we have a big problem with in the US right now, but it's always been here. And it was definitely, you know, really strong in the 60s, 50s, 60s. You got to be a man, you know, you can't show emotion. You got to be stoic. You got to be tough and violent.
Yeah, there's a really strict set of circumstances that you had to perform.
Right. And that was true even, you know, in the early 60s. And so I think Rod was also pushing back against that a little bit here, because he does that in a lot of Twilight Zone episodes. You know, they generally are not pro-war or violence. So he's, you know, he's always been very progressive for his time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is like the first progressive show. I have a lot of, you know, like Star Trek related guests on here, because for me, I'm like, well, they kind of go together, you know, the same sort of messages. That people complaining like, oh, you have these two woke messages in New Trek. It's like, it's always been like that since 1966.
They've not been paying attention.
Right. And also, or like looking at it now, you don't realize how progressive it was, you know, when you take into consideration the time, and World War II had not ended that long ago, and having a Japanese American on the bridge, it was like a big deal. Like,
and then a Russian after that.
Yeah, right. So, and that's like, you're getting into Cold War shit.
Yep.
I mean, oops, I'm not supposed to say a bad word, am I? This is PG.
I have a fantastic censor I can use.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Now.
I love my censor. The fact that the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone also had a bunch of like, oh, it's too progressive, and there's things in progressivism which maybe don't sound perfect to me, but I'm certainly, let's talk about it. Maybe you might convince me, or I might make a good point. I don't know. That the just the echo chamber and the increasing polarity of everyone in the States. You're on this side and you're on this side, and it's it's interesting to talk to people with different views.
Yeah, I would say that if it's not progressive, it can't be the Twilight Zone, because it has been the heart of the show since it was created. Rod, there was that story going around that it was created because he wanted to tell a story about Emmett Till, and they wouldn't let him. And so they said it was too political. And he said, well, what can I do to get these messages across? I can couch it in science fiction.
Right.
And that's how they get it through. And so if it's not, not every Twilight Zone episode is necessarily political, but at heart, the show is. And if you're doing a new version of the Twilight Zone and it's not going to have that progressive political heart, then it's not the Twilight Zone.
And really the pilot is not so much that way. And that's probably why the show made it on the air,
right?
Which is amazing. Like, it's like not as Twilight Zone-y as the other episodes, but also like Rod was like super famous when this show started. Like, he was a big deal. They were going to let him do stuff. So he was like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. And it's pretty cool.
He used his powers for good.
He used his powers for good.
Yeah.
And they were like, what are you doing science fiction for? You're a top writer. Why are you slumming? And I hope that was the first time someone said, hold my beer, please. But I'm gonna go make one of the best TV shows ever. While we're just laying out basic ideas, is there anything else that definitely, if you have something in your notes, I want to hear it. So
let's see.
Tilly's like super prepared.
I covered a lot of the big stuff, but let's see, what haven't we talked about? I'm scrolling through here.
Well, you know what? I was just gonna mention how cool it was how they shot this episode. Like with the actor, like they did those mirrors like glass, like he was just behind it talking, like, which is very cool.
It was rear projection, I thought,
or something like that. Yeah, where it was
he filmed the reflection parts first, and they projected it there for him to actually react
so
to
he
live.
he could interact with it more naturally, which is very interesting. Yeah.
And the actor, let's go find his name again there. It is Joe Mantel. Yeah, just he makes the two versions so different,
really, he does a great job.
It's really hard to even convince yourself you're watching the same person, which adds to your allegory. So
and I love that moment at the end where George comes in to sort of give him the consequences for not being the man society wanted him to be, and he's got his head down, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen to poor Jackie? And he looks up and you instantly know that's not Jackie, that's the real him. He's got confidence now. He was lacking any kind of confidence, and that's a big thing that I noticed, like with my own transition, is that pre-transition I had no confidence. I was super shy. I was super reserved and withdrawn from everybody in public situations because I didn't know how to interact with people, on top of trying to pretend to be a man that I didn't know how to be. So it was so difficult. But once that was removed and I got to just be myself, now I'm like happy to talk to strangers I've never met before. It's really weird for me. But I have this newfound confidence. I'm okay with approaching people and talking to them because I don't have all of that other baggage weighing me down.
I don't, but you can. That's fine.
We're different people. That's how it goes.
We are.
Yeah. Weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons I've, I can, my friend was just like, hey, let's do a podcast. Sounds like fun. But, I started realizing like, this is kind of my tool to become more outgoing and to get into more, lots of interesting conversations with lots of different, interesting people, right? Back to Trek, that's your idic, I guess, but.
Exactly right.
Yep.
So we might hit upon a few more points, but I'm going to shift gears into the questions that I ask each episode. Got to make it seem like I have a format. The first one should be pretty easy because there's only 2 people in this episode, which is who exactly went into the Twilight Zone. It seems like kind of a dumb question in this setting, but want to consider George?
You could make a case that George, aka society, got thrown into the Twilight Zone, because that's kind of what happens when a trans person comes out, because it throws the false, binary order of society into chaos. And that's what happened to George, right? Jackie embraces his true self, becomes John, right? Not Jane. I keep forgetting.
Yeah. And you're right.
And then he throws him out, and you see instantly the second he stands up for himself, George becomes meek. He runs away. He doesn't even fight back. He's like, "Oh my God, I can't handle this. I don't know what to do," and he just bolts. So you could make a case that society got thrown into the Twilight Zone.
Like, every time someone challenges the status quo, it pushes forward acceptance.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay, you just set up my second question to be a doozy, because I think we should talk about George in this case then, but if you want to talk about John, Jack, John, we can do that as well. But the question, when I made the question, I didn't realize how loaded the word is, and now that I've done about 40 of these episodes, I'm like, oh, this is a little bit of a loaded word. But do they deserve their trip through the Twilight Zone?
Well, George definitely does, because society has tried to impose this sort of false order on everybody for a really long time,
and I'm sure everyone around George imposed it on him, and so that is the way he knows. Cycle. Right, he perpetuates it.
I mean, like, there's even the old guy that they want Jackie to go get rid of, because he wouldn't conform to what they wanted him to be, and he caused problems. And George tells him, if you get rid of him, it'll send a message to all the others that if you don't conform, you're gonna experience violence. That's not acceptable.
Right.
So I'm definitely liking this case. It's definitely George in society that go through the Twilight Zone. Yeah, but that's a very interesting. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely, Jackie becoming John, or AKA Jane, is sort of the through line and the main point of the story. But yeah, I think it goes the other way the opening and closing voiceovers tell you that it's Jackie that's going through the Twilight Zone. But I mean, and you could make a case that, discovering your trans is kind of like going through the Twilight Zone, when you understand why the world felt broken your whole life. But maybe there's a case both ways.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, and with John, Jackie, Jane, whatever, the 3 J's, we'll call them the 3 J's. But it's like before his transition, he's such a broken man. It's like, So does he
doesn't know what to do. He's super nervous.
He's super nervous. He
doesn't trust any of his actual feelings.
Right. He's always chewing his nail. And the funny thing is, after we first saw this, I posted on Twitter that I could not believe how trans this episode felt. And a trans woman friend of mine, who is also a big Twilight Zone fan, was familiar with the episode and was like, holy crap, I never saw that. And I also used to bite my nails pre-transition, and I stopped once I transitioned because
that's wild.
I changed so much. Yeah. I was like, how about that? Your habits change because you're not a nervous wreck all the time anymore, because
very interesting.
The world makes sense.
I gotta claim some nail biting.
Listen, we all do it sometimes. It happens.
Yeah, my bugaboo is ever hear of Restless Leg Syndrome?
Oh yeah, I got I'm doing it right now.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because again, if it's like people that don't have it, or like, someone made that up. I mean, I don't take medicine for it, but yeah, probably once a month, I'll just be in bed at like 3 a.m, like just kicking.
So I used to do that when I was a kid.
Yeah,
in bed. Yeah,
I still do. So and that, well, I mean, that's 3 a.m. That's when you at least feel like your legs don't fit, right? But I guess watching this guy's inner turmoil, like, that's the thing. Our 3J dude is not, he's not experiencing Twilight Zone. He's in experience, actual, like, my life is in the wrong place, fallback. Like he's experiencing the real zone.
I think you're right. Absolutely.
Could be.
I guess George is the one that actually takes the trips and hopefully learns something from it.
Mm-hmm.
My third question is, well, I used to do psychedelic record reviews where I would do a quality review, which I just don't want to do for the Twilight Zone. So I use my other rubric, which is the tripometer. How trippy, how psychedelic is this episode? 0 is it's not trippy at all. 5 is it's super trippy. Susan, I guess I'll ask you first because your name is first on the Zoom.
It's not that trippy. I mean, Twilight Zone goes pretty trippy.
It does.
So this is like a 2, I would say, on the scale.
Okay. Tilly, where do you want to throw your rating on this one?
It's a 0 for me because it's my life. It's what I went through, right? I think it's very, very similar to what almost every trans person goes through. So
not trippy at all.
It's not trippy. I mean, it's trippy in that, oh my God, this has happened to me and I'm seeing it on TV. Mm-hmm. But other than that, no, it's not. This is just normal life for trans people. That's what was so surprising to me. It was like, you took what happened to me and put it on TV decades before I was born. Rod, how did you do that?
For me, I'm actually going to go higher. I'm going to go to the 4, and I found a lot of the time that what I decide is trippy is kind of more reality bending than like seeing weird things on the screen. And now this one gets an extra point for me just because all of those mirror effects, like I just like, breathe in that sort of stuff on 1960s television. That's awesome. I love it. And so it's like we get our effects shot for like half this episode. I'm like, okay, for me that ups the score. But just the idea, and I mean, I had it kind of pop in my head as you were starting to do your breakdown, but I'm like, I feel like when I think back to this episode, it is like I'm standing outside of someone's brain and just looking in the whole time,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's trippy for me.
Yeah. And I did find it a little trippy at first at the end when he spins the mirror and his reflection keeps getting closer and closer and bigger and bigger. And but then that trippiness went away once I figured out why I connected so strongly with the episode, because I'm like, oh, that's just the real him finally coming closer and then taking over. Because as soon as that scene ends, the nervous, broken, beaten down Jackie is gone. So
right.
Yeah.
But that's another one reason I like these questions, because trippy means different things to different people.
Yeah,
so
it's all subjective.
Right. The explanation is, usually more than the rating. Yeah. You spoke when we did the Matrix. You spoke to my co-host Luke, who has basically been giving his tripometer ratings when he's on as a huh? He'll just give a noise for what his tripometer rating is. Which, hey, maybe that is more effective. I don't know. So we can I guess go ahead and put this one in the shop, but Tilly, I guess this one's your episode since you're doing a double header. Would you tell people about where they can find yours and Susan's work?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we run a podcasting company that has about 20 different shows. Most of them are scripted. You can find those at pendantaudio.com. They've been running for a really long time. Lots of them have very big back catalogs. Mostly it's sci-fi shows.
Weird, right?
Weird. As you mentioned earlier, you can find our writing website is at birdguest.com. It's got links to all of the writing that we do in comics and tabletop role-playing games. There's no links to our TV work yet because we can't talk about it yet, but that is happening, and links will go up once we can.
And we write for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game.
I mentioned the role-playing stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't say it was Star Trek.
Okay, well, it is the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game we're writing for. And we're possibly writing for another game too.
So
that we're working on. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Just go. That's what the website's for. Yeah. You go there. And
we're on Twitter all the time. Yes. Tilly's always on Twitter.
Okay, I'm very online. You can find me at Tilly Bridges on Twitter. And if you are interested in if you enjoyed me breaking this down from a trans perspective, you can find all of my Matrix franchise trans allegory breakdowns in my pinned tweet. There's like 24 threads now, 65,000 words or something like that.
It's a lot of words.
Covering everything. And so if you dug this, then you may dig those.
And I'm at Susan L. Bridges on Twitter. So whatever. I'm there for it. Whatever.
You are responsible on Twitter for sure. I haven't quite. Actually, you know what? I usually end up booking my guests through like Facebook or direct emails. I think you're the first person I've actually booked through Twitter myself.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I'm so honored.
I'm just learning the Twitter, how to use Twitter in 2022. But you know, it's kind of like a promotional tool for me, right?
Yeah. A lot of people use it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I found my biggest social thing these days is a nice Discord, right? Which actually is the Mission Log Discord, because I hang out in there, and you know, we talk about these episodes. We talk about Trek, of course, and you just find it's a large group of people, and you know, all of them are kind of groovy, right? So
sure.
Because Facebook, it's like you post something, your great aunt is like, that looks like a nice sandwich you took a picture of there. Right?
Yeah.
That's the beginning and the end of it, right? So
pretty much.
So you can find this podcast on Twitter, though. It's Time Enough Pod on Twitter and Facebook. I will respond on both. So the fact that I don't use Twitter that much doesn't mean I won't respond to the Twitter. We're on Patreon under the podcasting umbrella of Podcastius, where you also hear us break down sci-fi films at Matt and Luke's Sci-Fi Sanctuary, and go listen to the one where Tilly breaks down The Matrix Reloaded. That's amazing. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that really good podcast. I was like, wait, I did that one. I've divorced myself from that podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, I was actually involved in that. That's cool. So
it happens to us all the time with our writing. I'm like, oh, we wrote this. It was so long ago, I didn't even remember. It's like,
I know, like I'm saying, or like, yeah, I'm listening to an episode of one of our shows, and I'm like, wait, I did that.
Did I write this?
Like I start to recognize the dialogue.
Sure, you're like, this is really good. I bet I wrote this.
I know, right? This isn't annoying me. Oh, it's mine.
Now, usually I try to end this episode by saying something mildly witty that probably fails most of the time, but I'm going to tell people how to, not Tilly, not your perspective on this episode, but the general like dealing with yourself in a mirror thing. There's a meditation that I sometimes do late at night. I don't do it that often because it's really intense. If you have a candle, you use a candle, or just really low lights, and you just stare yourself in the right eye in the mirror as long as you can, and weird things happen. It's kind of cool.
It sounds a little creepy.
Yeah, I did that when I was in 6th grade, but
sixth grade.
Yeah, and said Bloody Mary.
Oh,
3
you did
times.
that. Oh, that's a different
thing.
Oh yeah. This is supposed to be. I read this from the Tibetans. So, but hey, maybe the Tibetans,
interesting.
Maybe the 6th grade Tibetans are off playing Bloody Mary. I don't know.
Perhaps it was a Western interpretation of the Tibetans.
We had to add violence, right? That's what we do.
And add violence.
Yeah.
That's the American way.